He is risen. He is risen indeed. That was one of my favorite things about Easter Sunday morning when I was a child. I went to a church that had a 7 a.m. service. It wasn't quite sunrise. And we didn't do it outside. We did it in the sanctuary, and the children's choir sang. And I remember how excited I was to get there for early church. My dad would drop me off, and everybody exuberantly greeting each other with, "He is risen indeed." And the joy of that very special morning. I pray that you are full of joy this morning as you engage in worship and perhaps spending time with family or friends or the beautiful day, that you remember that you are deeply loved, that Jesus came to show us the ultimate love by sacrificing himself for us. God loves us beyond all measure, and each and every one of you are precious in God's sight, and each and every one of you have received the gift of grace so freely given to reconnect you to God and to each other and to your true self, that no matter what you have done or how you have separated yourself out, or if you are used to the word sin, if you find that you feel some part of you that is not as whole and is not as sin-free as you would like, know that you are forgiven and made new in this precious gift of life and death and resurrection. The story from Mark today in the 16th chapter ends, scholars believe in their research that actually the 8th verse is the actual end of Mark, which ends where the women, Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James, they have gone, and Salome, they brought spices so that they might anoint the body of Jesus very early on that first day of the week. They were worried about how they were going to roll that stone away from the tomb, but when they got there, the stone was already moved. And inside were a couple of angels that said, "Do not be afraid. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified, but he's been raised and he is not here. Look." And they pointed to the empty tomb. And the angel told them, Go and tell the disciples and Peter, and tell them what you have seen." So they went out and fled the tomb with terror and amazement. And they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. Scholars believe that's where the text originally ended, but it seemed like not an ending, and that perhaps over time, maybe a monk in writing the story, transcribing it again, thought, I'll just add a little extra on the end there. I'll just make it a little nicer and make sure that Jesus shows up for the ending. And so we have the rest of the book as we know it now, that on the next day, Jesus did appear to Mary Magdalene, and she went out and told the people who had been waiting, and then they heard that Jesus was alive. They didn't want to believe it either, and so then Jesus appears a few more times. What I like about that part of the story, about the fact that the story ends so abruptly, perhaps originally, and what's hard about it, is that the women don't do what they're told. They go out and they don't tell anybody. Now, I don't know about you, but I love the fact that in the Gospels, the women are the ones that Jesus appears to first, and they're the ones that spread the news, because that makes them the original preachers of the gospel. They are the ones that go out and tell the good news and start to share it. I love that part of the story. But I also kind of like this sassy ending where the women are afraid and they're amazed, and they don't tell anybody. They don't know what to do with it. And what I learned about this is that Mark has a funny beginning, the book. It just says, in the beginning, this is the beginning of the good news, and then just plunges right into the story, and at the end, just story's over without any glamorous ending. But what that tells us is that the writing wasn't for the people who were there and experienced it, because it was written after probably many of those people had already died 70 or 80 years later, after Jesus died. The story was written down for all the people afterwards. And we know how the story ends. So in writing his story this way of how Jesus' life and ministry and death and resurrection happened, it puts us in the story ourselves, because we are then the ones that are called to go and tell. What do you like to go and tell about? I know before the pandemic, I loved to go and tell about a great restaurant. If I ate somewhere new and they had vegan food, I would go and tell about that. I know when I find some new website or podcast, or I read an article, I go and tell other people about it. What are the kinds of things that you feel very comfortable going and telling about? I wonder what we feel uncomfortable going and telling about. I know there was a period of time in my life where I was very uncomfortable going and telling anybody about my faith or talking about Jesus. There was a time in my life when I lived in a very highly educated area, and many of my friends were not believers, and even those who were people of faith, they perhaps feel less like the resurrection maybe really happened. They feel like maybe like, well, it's a parable for us, or it's their understanding of the situation at that time. And so I became uncomfortable myself talking about the fact that Jesus died and raised again 3 days later. In Bible study this past week, we talked about how we all felt about that, and all of us in the Bible study, and you can be where you want to be on your journey. We are all on a journey, and wherever you are on your journey, you're welcome here at Edwards, because we find it's a place that we can talk with each other about the things we're unsure about. We can question things with each other. We can be open to listening to each other, and never has it been more important than now to be able to listen to the other person and their questions, their doubts, their thoughts, and their ideas. At some point, I got to the point where I just decided to accept it at face value and not to spend any more time worrying about how it would have worked or how it doesn't make any sense. And I just let that be a God moment in my life. And I'm at a place where I can just accept it as it is. And now I feel more free to go and tell. I feel more free to go and tell about the ways in which God has worked in my life, about the serendipitous, supposedly, events that have fallen into place, getting me to a certain outcome that I would never have expected. When the angel Gabriel tells Mary, "Do not be afraid," and tells Joseph, "Do not be afraid," we know that it's going to be okay. And those angels tell the women, "Do not be afraid." We also are in a time where we are perhaps being told by God, "Do not be afraid." Resurrection doesn't look like we think it is going to look. All of the people surrounding Jesus throughout his life were told many times that he was going to come back, that he was going to rise again, that his kingdom would go on, that his creation, God's creation of all of us being one and mattering to each other to break down the walls that divide us due to money or occupation or beliefs, that we don't have to hang on to rules more than we hang on to people. That is something that we can go and tell. What could you go and tell right now about your faith to somebody else? How would you feel empowered to go and tell somebody who is worried or afraid, somebody who doesn't have people in their life, or somebody who is very uncomfortable with people in their life? Are you somebody who can walk alongside somebody else, breaking down those walls of kingdom to create God's kingdom right now here on earth? As a church, we did not see resurrection from the pandemic coming from worship online, and we sure didn't see it happening for more than 52 weeks. We didn't think it was going to go on for more than a couple weeks. And this is the 53rd week that we have had our worship time available to anybody who finds us on the web. Have you gone and told anybody about this opportunity? If this is a meaningful service to you, if this group of people that you've seen over a course of weeks and weeks and weeks, reading scriptures, telling stories, sharing their faith stories, sharing their hearts with you, have you gone and told anybody about that? Because resurrection for that person might be somewhere that they're not looking. We have an opportunity as a congregation to go and tell the community about who we are. There's a lot of things that we do well. There's a rich history in our congregation of ways in which we have reached out and been a home. Our building has been a home to the first, what they called back then, handicap school for the District of Davenport. It has been a home for Head Start. It has been home for the International Adoption Agency. It has been the home to a very large Sunday school. It has been the home to a preschool, to Mother's Day Out. It has been a home to various musical groups and organizations that have practiced here. It has been the home to people who have traveled to Biloxi. It has been a home to people who used to go do the Bics together, who would go to the North Woods to canoe. It has been a home for many people over the years through many different changes. And we are at that point to really choose what way are we going to go and tell the good news. And the good news that we are Edwards Church. The first good news is that Jesus came down to show us that we all live in God's kingdom, no matter who or where, no matter what journey you are on, that you are welcome here. And the good news that Jesus came for every single one of us to show us that we too can live that resurrection joy in our own lives. That because Jesus was resurrected, because Jesus died to make our lives new, that we can reach out in our lives and make our lives new and make this congregation a new energy in the community. But it takes you, every single one of you watching today, to either open up your email from us, to call the church and ask for your own paper copy of the survey, or to go to our website at edwards-ucc.org and fill out our survey. We have sent it out by email to hundreds of people. Now, we have a nice turnout right now. Last I heard, it was about 33, which is a good number compared to the people, like that are in the pews, because there's no people in the pews right now. But it's not enough of you. What is meaningful to you? How are we going to gather our energy together? those of us who we know who are involved in our church before the pandemic, who come in and out of this building, are by and large older folks. We're not going to lie about that. People with vision, people with energy, and people who have been doing it a long time. And we need more people to come alongside us who are interested in what it is we're doing. We feed people. We care for people. We teach people what is the thing that really would excite you to be a part of this community. We are asking each and every one of you to go and tell about your life, and go and tell us about your life and what makes your life stronger and better. Jesus called us to share the good news. We are being told, go and tell. And we want to do it in the very best way that we can, through prayer, prayerfully considering what God is calling us to next. So would you please prayerfully consider filling out your survey and being a part of a community that is called and is calling to go and tell. Amen.